welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Hot Yarns. In this video, I will show you how to make the Rendezvous knit shawl. This is a beautiful shawl using a brand new yarn from Red Heart called Colorscapes. Some of you saw me wearing this shawl in the braided knit cable throw video, and you have been requesting this video. And I told you, just wait, it's coming, and here it is. This shawl is very easy to make. It uses some very simple lace stitches that I will show you how to do in the video, and you will be able to complete this shawl with no problem. To make this shawl, you will need 4 balls of Red Heart's Colorscape yarn, and this yarn is absolutely fantastic. It comes in a plethora of really beautiful colors. Along with the yarn, you will need a set of size 10 knitting needles and a good pair of scissors. Once you have the materials, go ahead and download the free pattern. It's available at redheart.com. I'll put a link in the video description box right down there below this video. And while you're down there, smash that like button so that other people know you enjoyed this video. Once you have the pattern and your materials, join me back here. I will walk you through everything you need to know to complete this really great shawl. I've been crocheting and knitting with the Colorscapes yarn for a little while now and have some new designs coming out. And I've got to tell you, I love working with this yarn. It is so easy. It glides right off of your needle or your hook, and it's a lot of fun to wear also. As we look at this shawl, you can see that there is some really great and subtle lace stitches happening in the body. These lace stitches are made by coupling up a yarn over and a yarn over with a decrease. In the body of this shawl, we will be using a decrease that gets rid of 2 stitches. Why 2 stitches? Because when we do these yarn overs, those are increases. And you'll notice there are 2 yarn overs on either side of the decrease. There is an exception to the decrease in the pattern when we are working with the yarn overs along the side of the shawl. When there's only 1 yarn over to get rid of, we will use a decrease that only gets rid of 1 stitch. So in essence, there's only 2 decreases you need to learn for this entire shawl, and then how to do those increases, which are just simple yarn overs. Some of you've been doing yarn overs since you started knitting, right? They might have been a mistake, but you've been doing them since the beginning. I am going to go ahead and follow along with the pattern as I'm working it up in this video. Hopefully you will too. And let's go ahead and get started. For this shawl, I want to begin with the Longtail cast on. So I want to make sure that I have enough yarn in the tail to get through all 57 stitches I need to cast on. Now I go ahead and I just grab a plethora of yarn and just kind of get started. Once you have enough yarn for the tail, go ahead and create your slip knot. Place the tail of your yarn in the palm of your hand. Take your working yarn, wrap it around your forefinger and your middle finger, and when you come back up, cross over. Once you cross over, rotate your hand, go underneath the first loop, grab the back loop, and pull it off. This loop here now goes onto one of your needles. Place it on your needle. And then we're going to position our yarn now on our hand so that way we can do the Longtail cast on. You want to take the tail and wrap it around your thumb just like so. Take the working yarn, wrap it around your finger just like so. I like to pull both of the ends of those pieces down here. Okay, so I'm in a position here where it looks like a slingshot. Notice that I have my finger on the loop that's on my needle so that way it doesn't fall off. Now I go ahead and complete the Longtail cast on. I go up my thumb, swivel around, go down my finger. I have this nice window right here that's created with my thumb, and I'm just going to swivel my needle right through that window. Now I let the yarn fall off my thumb, pull the tails, and it snugs that stitch up. Reposition my yarn, and I do it again. Up the thumb, down the finger, through the window, off the thumb. Make sure when you position the yarn again, the yarn is coming from the outside of the thumb and then the outside of the finger, okay? Kind of looks like an M, or right now it looks like a heart. Go up the thumb, down the finger, through the window, off the thumb. Up the thumb, down the finger, through the window, off the thumb. Go ahead, carry on casting on your stitches until you get 57 stitches on your needle. Some of you might be wondering, Marley, do I have to use the Longtail cast on? And the answer is no. You can use whatever cast on you are comfortable with. But when I'm teaching a video for something like this, I like to have a nice stable cast on for the stitches to work into, because we jump right into those lace stitches. And I really like the look of the Longtail cast on when I put those on my needle. For my swatch today, I'm only going to cast on 15 stitches, and that will work us through the entire stitch pattern repeat. For you, you want to make sure you have your 57 stitches for the shawl. Once you have your stitches cast on, go ahead and put your needle in your left hand, and we will jump in with row 1. And row 1 has us begin right into that lace pattern. So we will go ahead and start off by knitting 3 stitches. So you will knit 3 stitches just like you normally do. Make sure you are using your working yarn and don't accidentally use your tail. Once you knit those 3 stitches, you'll notice in the pattern this is where there's a star. That star indicates the start of your repeat. So you will continually go back to that star point when the pattern tells you to repeat from star. Okay, so this is our repeat. The stitch pattern repeat for this starts off with the yarn over. So you take your yarn. We're at the back of the needles, we go up between the needles, and then go back over top of our right hand needle, back to the back. That loop right there that's resting on my right hand needle, that is my yarn over, so I don't want it to go anywhere. Once I do that yarn over, I will now do my decrease that gets rid of 2 stitches. The SK2P means you slip 1 stitch as if to knit. The next 2 stitches, we will knit those 2 together. Okay, so we're going to knit those 2 stitches together. So that got rid of 1 stitch. Now we're going to take that stitch that we slipped, we're going to have it jump up and over that stitch that we just finished knitting. That got rid of 2 stitches, okay? Now we have another yarn over, so our yarn's in back, between the needles, over top of the right hand needle, back to the back, that's our yarn over. And now we'll knit 3. So 1, 2, and 3. At this point, it says repeat from star across. So you would go back to the star and repeat. So our yarn's in back, between our needles, go back over top of our right hand needle, back to the back. We do our decrease, which is slip 1 as if to knit. Knit the next 2 stitches together. And then have this stitch that you slipped jump up and over that stitch you just knit 2 together. Now we have another yarn over, so I bring our yarn between the needles, up over top of the right hand needle, and then we knit 3. 1, 2, and 3. Now this brings me to the end of my swatch. For you, you'll have more stitches because you have more stitches than I do. Once you've done that, go ahead, put the needle with all the stitches on it into your left hand, and you carry on to row 2. Row 2 has us start off with a knit 3. So we start off with knit 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And then we purl to the last 3 stitches. So even when you come to a stitch that looks like that, where it looks a little goofy there, that's your yarn over. So you are simply just going to purl it. Treat it as if it's a stitch, because it is. Even though it looks goofy, it looks like something that you might have done on accident when you first started knitting, we are doing those on purpose. They're called yarn overs. And we are creating that extra stitch there, which then gets eliminated by the decrease. And when I say eliminated, I mean the stitch count stays the same, because when we make those increases, we are also doing those decreases to keep the stitch count the same. Well, I'm to the last 3 stitches here. So I'm to the last 3 stitches, and I want to knit these last 3 stitches. Now I move on to row 3, where I turn my work, And row 3 is just a repeat of row 1. So this is really great. So far, you've already learned half of the stitch pattern. So we are going to repeat row 1, and then we will repeat row 2, and then repeat row 1, and repeat row 2 until we get through row 8. For this part, I'm going to go ahead and hold my yarn in my left hand for those of you who are Continental knitters, so I can show you how it looks with Continental. We will begin with our knit 3. And then this is our repeat. So we yarn over our needle. So I put my yarn over my right hand needle, and then I work my decrease. So I slip one as if to knit, knit 2 together, and then pass that slip stitch up and over the one I knit 2 together. Yarn over again, and then knit 3. 1, 2, 3. Work my repeat, yarn over my needle, slip one as if to knit, knit 2 together, pass the slip stitch up and over the one I knit 2 together, yarn over my needle, and then knit 3. Row 4 is a repeat of row 2, so I go ahead, put my work in my other hand. I start off with knit 3. I want to show you how I do this with Continental for those of you who are Continental. And then I just purl. Again, treating all those yarn overs as if they're just a normal stitch. Don't do anything extra. Don't drop them off your needle. Don't try and knit them with something else. Even though they look just like that, you just purl it. Treat it just like a normal stitch. When you get to the last 3 stitches, you knit 3. And I'm going to continue repeating these 2 patterns through row 8. Join me back here when you get to row 9 and we'll learn the next decrease. How you liking it so far? Pretty easy, right? As long as you remember to do your yarn overs on either side of that decrease you've been working, you should still have the same stitch count. Now, when we go to row 9, we are going to transition and make sure that our lace stitches are going to stagger a little bit. So that way we aren't getting a straight column of lace stitches, we have it stagger. Let me show you what I mean. As you take a look down here, you can see that this column of stitches right here, it shifts over and it comes and it begins over here, and then we get this nice stockinette section. So this right here, this is what we've just completed, and now we're shifting over and we're going to put our lace stitches over here. When we do that, that means that the edges of our shawl are going to change up because they aren't going to have a decrease with a yarn over on either side. It's just going to have one yarn over, which means that we need a decrease that only gets rid of one stitch. So that's what makes this part just a little bit different. So for row 9, we're going to jump in and start off with that. Okay, so I am at my row 9 and I'm going to begin here. We start off with a knit 1. So I knit 1 stitch, and now we're going to do a knit 2 together. So just like we were doing before, we are going to knit these 2 stitches together. And by knitting those 2 stitches together, we've just worked a decrease. But now we have to do a yarn over. So I yarn over my needle, and that puts us back to the same stitch count, okay? So right there, that is the start. That's the part where I'm telling you there's the decrease, there's the yarn over, and now we begin staggering our stitches. We go on and we knit 3, so 1, 2, and 3, and now we have our repeat. We yarn over our needle, and we do our slip one as if to knit, our knit 2 together, and then pass that slip stitch over. Work our yarn over, and then knit 3. 1, 2, and 3. Once you've worked through the repeat to the end, to the last 3 stitches, we have to do another single decrease and a single yarn over. We're to the last 3 stitches here, so we go ahead and yarn over our needle, and we're going to do an SKP. So we slip one as if to knit, knit 1 stitch, and then pass that slip stitch over. And then you finish off with the knit 1. I still have 15 stitches on my needle after this row. And if you've done everything correctly, you still have 57 stitches. We go ahead, put our needle in our opposite hand, and we work back row 10 just as written. So we start off with a knit 3, and then we purl to the last 3 stitches. This is just like what we did on all the other wrong side rows when we were working those. When you get to the last 3 stitches, make sure that you knit the last 3 stitches and then turn your work and carry on. So I turn my work, and rows 11 through 16 are just a repeat of rows 9 and 10. Very similar to what we did when we repeated 1 and 2, okay? So we are going to work those repeats. Because I want to show you Continental knitters out there what it looks like to work this row, I'm going to show you how to do row 9 and 10 again for row 11 and 12. Here we go. So I will hold my yarn in my left hand, and I will begin with a knit 1. I will then knit 2 stitches together and then yarn over. Knit 3 and begin my repeat. Yarn over, slip 1 as if to knit, knit 2 stitches together, pass that slip stitch over. Yarn over, knit 3. Now you would repeat that down to the end of your row. This is the end of my row, so I will go ahead and continue on. I'm to my last 3 stitches, so I yarn over my needle, slip 1 as if to knit 1 stitch, pass that slip stitch over, and then knit 1. Again, I could go ahead, I could count this row. I know I still have 15 stitches, and if you notice, the lace stitches that we're building right there are now shifting over, and we're building them right here. I carry on, and I put my work in my other hand, and I move on to the next row. So technically this is row 12, and it's a repeat of row 10. So I start off with a knit 3, and then I purl to the last 3 stitches. When I get to those last 3 stitches, I finish off with a knit 3. Pretty simple. You'll go ahead and repeat these rows through row 16. Then all you need to do is repeat rows 1 through 16 for the full length of the shawl. Really super easy, right? All you need to know, you just learned, with the exception of, how do you add a new ball of yarn when it's time to add a new ball of yarn? Well, let me show you how to do that. I'm going to use a different type of yarn just so you can see how this works, and it really is as easy as this. Take the new yarn you want to add in, okay, so this would be the exact same colorway of whatever you're using for your shawl, and when you go to work your first stitch, instead of yarning over with your old yarn, all you will do is take your new yarn here, leave yourself a nice long tail, and yarn over with your new yarn. Now I will carry on now just knitting with my new yarn. Now this yarn's too thin for this size needles, but I would carry on in whatever the pattern is, just using the new yarn. If it's the same yarn as you were using, then it's not going to show like this, obviously, but it really is that simple. When you're all done with the project, you will then go back, take these two ends, and then weave them in. So that's how you will add a new ball of yarn. Now, on a side note, if you're working with your yarn, and this goes across the board with any yarns you happen to be using, if you come across a knot in your yarn, always cut out that knot and rejoin your yarn in this same method, okay? Don't ever leave a knot in your knitting. It's not good. Now that you know how to join a new ball of yarn, the only thing left for you to learn is how to bind off your stitches. Now you want to work the length of the shawl, let's see, ending with a row 8, and then you'll bind off. So I'm going to show you how to work those bind off stitches. To bind off this shawl, you want to end with a row 8. So I'm beginning row 9. And on row 9, I'm actually going to bind off, okay? So I have my work worked up to this point. And to bind off, it's really as simple as any other bind off you might have done in knitting. You knit 1 stitch, you knit the next stitch, and have the first stitch jump up and over that second stitch. Now you're left with 1 stitch on your right hand needle. Knit 1 more stitch, have the back stitch jump up and over that front stitch. You're left with 1 stitch, and you knit 1 more from the left hand needle, so you can get back to 2 stitches on the right hand, jump up and over. And you'll do this all the way down, being careful not to bind off too tightly, okay? You want to make sure that you give yourself a little bit of slack here on the stitch that's on your right hand needle before you go and knit that next one, because that gives you a little bit of loose to your bind off, so it's not like super duper tight. And when you get to the end of your row, you will simply cut your work, pull the end, and weave it in. So I'm going to get down there so I can show you what that looks like. You notice I'm just binding off all the way down. Nothing special. Don't have to do any sort of special stretchy bind off. You could if you wanted to, but you don't have to. So I'm just binding off these stitches, and they're all knit. I'm not doing any decrease, no yarn over, no purl, just knitting, and then having the back stitch jumping up and over the front. This is my last one. Have the back jump up and over the front. I want to make sure I leave a tail that's at least 4 to 6 inches. And right here at the end, I have a choice. I can either just pull this through and just pull that all the way through. But what I like to do just to make sure is I like to pull that tail through that final stitch and give it a tug, okay? Once I've done that, I then will take my bent tip tapestry needle. Let me move all these out of the way. Thread my tail onto my bent tip tapestry needle, and on the wrong side of my fabric, weave in my end. Now, you don't have to do any special rhyme or reason, but what I like to do, I like to actually split the yarn, especially with this one because it's a kind of a lightly spun roving type, and just kind of work my end through to make sure it's nice and secure, okay? Just really simple. You notice I went up and down. I made sure that nothing is really nice and puckered or anything like that, and I'm going to finish it off with my yarn coming up here to the end. I would give that a nice little snip, and that would be the end of my work there. And I could do the same thing down here, and at any point where I had to add a new ball of yarn, I would weave in the exact same way. And there you have it. You are all done with this really great Rendezvous knit shawl. It's so beautiful. It looks gorgeous on. It's definitely my colors. I love this so much. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and this is one of those projects that you can't wait to get the yarn on your needles and get started. I'm Marley Bird, proud national spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns. I hope you'll come back soon. Bye. Everything you need to know about knitting or crochet can be found right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Learn with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.